Hey folks, so I have some really exciting news. I'm going to be adding another segment to my channel. I know I try to go over all sorts of different topics, from vehicle reviews to accessory reviews to truck reviews and everything else that I talk about on my channel, even general ranting. One area that I've really wanted to dive deeper into is actually being out there on the street with the different types of people that use vehicles in different industries. I thought a really good way of starting that off would be to use some of the relationships that I currently have with law enforcement to spend some time with officers in the field to get a really good understanding of how they use their vehicles, what their vehicle preferences are, as well as if they have any specific type of need that their vehicle fits for a specific job.
Here you go, brother.
Thanks, brother.
Thanks, man. You take care. You too.
Now, if you followed my channel for any amount of time, you know that I work very closely with law enforcement agencies from federal, state, and local agencies. I've spent a lot of time with officers as well as chiefs, lieutenants, and captains in the field understanding what their needs are. So I have a pretty good idea of where I want to go with this type of video. I think if I do a ride along and spend some time in the field with these officers, I can get a pretty good idea of what they look for in vehicles, what their specific wants are, what their needs are, what they think will help them do their job most effectively, and even from a personal perspective. Maybe they have a great vehicle that they love driving for work, but then their personal vehicle is a completely different type that they really love as well. So I want to take time to understand exactly what their opinion is on personal vehicles versus their work vehicles. I've worked very closely with law enforcement in the field to understand that most agencies now have a variety of vehicles to choose from that they never really had available to them in the past. Your manufacturers such as Ram, Ford, General Motors are producing more and more Pursuit or Interceptor type vehicles now than they've ever produced. For instance, you can now buy several different models of Ford vehicles, whether it's going to be an Interceptor car, an SUV, or a pickup truck. GM has also followed suit with their own Pursuit rated vehicles. They have the Tahoe as well as some other vehicles that they can use that are Pursuit rated as well. Chrysler, of course, has the Dodge Charger as well as the Dodge Durango. And Ram now produces a special service vehicle designed for use by police departments and law enforcement agencies. Generally, these vehicles are relatively stripped out simply because they know law enforcement agencies are going to upfit these vehicles by adding different equipment to them. However, a lot of these vehicles have some extra capabilities that non-special service vehicles wouldn't have, such as beefed up alternators, beefed up springs and shocks, sometimes chassis reinforcements, and other componentry built into the engine and drivetrain and chassis that help the vehicle withstand harsher conditions, corner better, and oftentimes take a certain level of abuse that a non-special service vehicle just wouldn't be able to take over a long period of time. Now, the goal behind doing a ride-along would be to get the officer's perspective, to talk to law enforcement agencies and officers in the field about what they really like about cars they've driven. I can tell you that I spent some time a while back with the sheriff's department. That sheriff's department told me they purchased all different types of vehicles. They had Expedition SUVs, they had Chargers, they had Ford Interceptors, they had Caprices, all sorts of different vehicles that they've used over time as pursuit vehicles, including Mustangs. Officers would definitely gravitate towards one type of vehicle over another based on the experiences that they'd have either with high-speed pursuits, even when they had to do special maneuvers like pit somebody. I spoke to another agency that had all Crown Vics, and they recently swapped their entire fleet out to all Ford Interceptor utility vehicles, which is essentially a police version of the Explorer. And they informed me that there were many differences in handling characteristics as well as expectations that you had to be aware of if you were going to be involved in any type of a high-speed pursuit or any type of high-speed maneuvering while you're driving down the street, especially if you're getting all-wheel drive equipped SUVs when your officers are used to rear-wheel drive vehicles. And I've even had opportunities to see some of these police vehicles involved in pretty horrific accidents because they were used in ways that the manufacturer really never intended for them. I saw a Ford Expedition hit a bump in the road, go airborne, and roll several times because its suspension wasn't designed for the type of driving conditions that it was being used for during a high-speed pursuit following a drug dealer. Officers and law enforcement agencies have to think well beyond just the performance capabilities of these vehicles and also look at the crash survivalness, because the last thing they want is to equip an officer with a vehicle that doesn't perform well in the types of accidents that officers get involved in. For instance, when they are doing a traffic stop and the rear end of their vehicle is essentially acting as a buffer between them and the person that they've pulled over, oftentimes can lead to pretty severe rear end collisions when somebody isn't paying attention and strikes the back of a patrol car, whether the officer is inside or whether he's standing in front of the vehicle. Also, when officers are running code and they're clearing intersections, there's a much greater likelihood of an officer-involved accident when people aren't paying attention or they simply don't have the time to stop and they either T-bone or sideswipe a police vehicle or the police vehicle hits them. Many law enforcement agencies, specifically sheriff's departments, tend to work very rural areas, and some of those areas require the need for larger SUVs or even pickup trucks to get to the places they need to go. Even canine officers have to be very specific about what type of vehicle they keep their canine in, specifically because they want them to be as comfortable as possible. They generally want them to be in the same cabin space as the officer himself or herself, and all of those play factors into the types of vehicles that officers prefer to drive. Most canine officers that I see prefer to drive around in Tahoes or sport utility vehicles like a Ford Interceptor utility versus patrol cars. And even many of your ghost vehicles or your vehicles that are assigned as UC vehicles or undercover vehicles, generally driven by detectives or senior officers, tend to be cars because it provides a much less conspicuous vehicle, and it's better if you need to use those vehicles in any type of an operation where you don't want to stand out like a marked patrol unit. But the purpose of this segment is not so you hear it from me, it's so you hear it from the officers and people in the field that use the vehicles. So I hope you look forward to these videos coming out. I do want to spend a lot of time with local and county-based law enforcement agencies and then migrate over to federal agencies like Department of Homeland Security, which encompasses things like Customs and Border Protection, Border Patrol, FBI, and even ICE. I'd really like to get your feedback, so please leave a comment below. Let me know what you think. And as always, if you like my videos, please take a moment to subscribe to my channel and give me a thumbs up. Thanks, everyone.